Rhodes Millerton was a woman who suffered many tragedies throughout her life. And ultimately, that would be a life that would be cut too short. Her story is one intertwined with this place, the Dice Road Cemetery. And this is her story. Anna Rhodes Millerton was born sometime in the year 1811. She would spend the beginning of her life in Italy. However, she wouldn't be staying there for very long. She went by Anna Rhodes Fazio at the time. In the year 1816, when Anna was only 5 years old, her house in Italy burnt down, burning both of her parents alive. What she didn't know at the time was that for an unknown reason the fire was started by her father. He had broken down and tried to kill his whole family. It is unclear how Anna survived the fire, but shortly after, she was sailed to live with her aunt in America. She would be adopted by her mother's sister, Stella Rhodes. Anna would grow up in Saginaw. In an attempt to conceal Anna's true identity, she would deny her last name, Fazio, and change it to Rhodes. She also would never tell her the truth of what happened to her family. Anna was apparently a very quiet child who never spoke about her parents or her short time in Italy. She would quickly become friends with the Sauk natives that lived in and around Saginaw. She became very close to a young boy named Darkhawk, and the two would become childhood friends. Darkhawk lived nearby to Anna, who only lived about 1.5 miles from where the Dice Road Cemetery would eventually be built. When Anna was 14 years old, she would fall in love with a lumberjack named Jonathan Millerton. Darkhawk had become enraged by this stranger who had entered Anna's life seemingly out of nowhere, and already stolen her away from him. Apparently, Darkhawk's family had expected her to marry him in the future, something that she was completely unaware of. Over the next 3 years, things would change significantly in the area. As more lumber mills were being constructed, more and more white settlers were showing up in and around Saginaw. Some of the natives, including Darkhawk, felt as if they were being pushed off their land. The small hamlet of Hemlock, which is where Anna and the others resided, was growing larger and larger by the years. Darkhawk, who was incredibly bitter towards Jonathan Millerton, was getting increasingly angry as more white settlers were showing up in the area. He was not alone in this sentiment, as the natives would refuse to sell their land. Many of the lumbermen decided to take the land by force. They began becoming more hostile and violent towards the natives, forcefully stealing the land from them. Anna and Jonathan did not support these methods. In May of 1828, Anna and Jonathan were married. Anna was only 17 years old. Only a few months later in August, Stella would pass away. Jonathan had to sail the Great Lakes on a voyage for transporting lumber. For the first time in her life, she was completely alone. During this time, Anna would begin writing in a journal, as a way to try to deal with this loneliness. She would write fantasies about how Jonathan was there with her, wrapped up in a quilt that was made by Stella, and how their future child was running around the halls of their home. In the summer of 1829, Darkhawk would come, seeking his revenge on the woman that he once loved. With no one around to protect her, he would assault her, again and again, night after night. She would never tell anybody about this, but she wrote of these things in detail in her journal. In the autumn of 1830, she got word that the ship that Jonathan sailed on had sunk. Her husband was dead. She was alone, and she couldn't take it anymore. She would take her own life. She would end up hanging herself from the rafters of a small shed that now sits in the back of the Dice Road Cemetery. On October 30th of 1830, Jonathan would return from his journey. His ship actually had not sunk. Jonathan's ship had returned to port after a delay, and rumors of a shipwreck was actually of a different ship. Jonathan would never remarry and would die in 1879. All of Anna's journals were sealed in the walls of the shed, only to be discovered over a century later.
Her children sleep.
The story of Anna Rhodes Millerton is undoubtedly a tragic one, but her legend will forever loom over the Dice Road Cemetery, and she will never be forgotten.
The sirens and lights, they pierced the night. Stirring up a sleeping appetite. When Katie spoke of crimson smoke and wings, the meadow larks in ghetto parks would sing. The melody would echo through the air, and travel through the window to her chair. In old shoes, the same views, the gravity of life to weigh her down. In gray dreams, the sky seems larger than it was, or is it because she lost her wings? She can't recall her steady fall from grace, but she was down on solid ground.